Hey, did you hear my son?
Aww.
He's out there. We call him Mr. Meeps because he makes noises where he's getting ready to go off. It's like meep, 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 meep. And then So welcome to the Tragedy Academy, a show created to bridge societal divides in a judgment-free zone using candor and humor. I am joined today by Dara McKinley. She began focusing on forgiveness back in 2012 after some personal life changes. Notice that while many people discuss why one should forgive, few explain how to do it effectively. So welcome to the show today, Dara. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. I'm doing well. How are you?
Living the dream. Well, you heard my son was making a cameo in the background as we came in.
Congratulations. That's
thank you so much. I appreciate that.
For sure.
It is. It is, for sure. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came into the forgiveness area of life?
Okay. Well, I have been a student and professionally pursuing spirituality and psychology. Like from the moment I started making those pursuits, I have a BA in psychology. I have a graduate degree in Buddhism and psychology. And have worked in the field.
Find yourself to be an existential, philosophical type of person, I would say then, right?
Very much so. Very
Love
much
that.
so. And really from my earliest days, but when I became cognitive, so maybe like 10, 11, just really noticed that I became, the way a little boy might become obsessed with trucks, I became obsessed with spirituality, psychology, and emotions and where the two intersected. So that was just my lens. And so 2 decades into this professional academic piece of it, I was in a business relationship where I ended up with business partners that were incompatible. And we kind of held on for as long as we could. And then the whole thing fell apart. And I ended up losing my share in the business. And there was definitely like a huge element of deceit around how the whole thing went down. So I was relieved to be out of these relationships. And I was also, my heart was broken that I had lost this because the business had been my idea. It was just definitely like my child. So, but at the time I was like, okay, I have been studying psychology and spirituality my whole life. If anyone can get through this, I can get through this. And so I'm going to...
It's always hard to walk the walk, isn't it? Like I'm talking the talk like a champ, but that walking the walk stuff, really, I've got like a backpack, lead shoes, and all sorts of excuses not to do it.
Right. Well, especially people like me, I feel like we definitely, get sent things that make us walk our talk. So here I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on recreating my life and I'm going to focus on all the good. And I had a tremendous amount of good in my life at the time. And I'm going to focus on gratitude and I'm going to process my emotions and be with my grief and all of that. And 3 years later, I still wasn't over it. And the reason I knew I wasn't over it is because I kept having, what you could call like intrusive thoughts, or I just kept ruminating on it a lot, just like out of nowhere. I'd be doing the laundry and all of a sudden I'd be like, wow, I can't believe that happened.
So let me pause right there real quick, because I think that you're hitting on something that's very important, because we don't discuss what goes on in the mind. We only discuss outcomes. And a lot of times if we have conversations about the fact that you can ruminate on things and have conversations with people outside of it over and over again, relay the pattern. I think that most people do this. They do like a reverse justification of Tetris, where they put the pieces back in place to make it feel better in the head. And when it doesn't, then we realize it's time we better look at something different. Does that make sense?
Yes, very, very much so. Yeah. Dun, dun, dun. That was a great segue. So as this is happening, as I'm noticing that I still have this negative narrative, looping in my head, I start to slide into a mystery illness. And the illness, it's insomnia, anxiety, fatigue, and the doctors can't figure it out. And I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old at the time.
You can't be down like that.
it can't be done like that. And I start freaking out that like something is really wrong with me. And then of course, me freaking out is just making all the symptoms even worse. So I arrived to October 2012, which is 3 years to the month that this whole business thing went down. And I am, you know, because I'm a very spiritual person, I'm also a very intuitive person, and I kind of know how to like really get down and dirty with surrender and kind of and receive, you know, I'm not psychic, I don't like see things, nothing like that, but like I can really receive strong intuitive hits. And so I thought, okay, this is one of these moments where I need help. I need a strong intuitive hit. I need guidance. I am becoming distraught. And so kind of just had this like deal with the universe, like, you tell me what to do right now, and, you know, I will do anything.
Yeah, it's kind of like a coming to your deity situation.
Right,
a lot of people say a coming to Jesus situation, but we'll just say a coming to your higher calling or whatever it might be.
Right.
But I like to call that the on the knees moment where you plant your tree to become a new person, but you cannot do it until you are on the ground and have shaken all of the BS behind you off.
Well said. So, and the message I got back was forgive. And I didn't like that message.
Who does? That's not fair. They didn't say they were sorry.
Yeah, and it definitely felt like there was something about the word that made me feel like I was giving more. Like just the fact that the word give was there, and I'd already lost so much. So anyway, so now here I am with this message to forgive, looking at the message through the lens of everything I'd heard my entire life, you know, since I was a little kid. You know, I was hearing about forgiveness, and forgiveness is the ability to pardon others and have compassion and let go of the past and just cease being angry. You know, these are all of the things that you know, come across most people who live in Western society's radar often. And so I was like, okay, I finally, after wrestling with it, the message was so strong and I was so desperate to feel better. So I was like, okay, I accept this mission. I'm a woman who can follow directions. There's got to be some like forgiveness how-to online. So let me go find this thing and I'll check it out. I have nothing to lose, right? So I type in how to forgive, and what comes up is, you know, search engine, you know, just link after link about why a person should forgive. And I was like, wow. And then like on a couple of forums, I found people asking, but how do you do it? And the response that they would get back is, you just do it. And
that's
so
a Nike ad. That's not how I'm supposed to solve my problems. I don't like that explanation. It's far too short for the situation.
Yeah, and I like truly could not just do it. I couldn't just do it. It was like there was no wiring in me for that.
Because there were too many details in the instructions? Feel like something was skipped there.
Right. I'm an ambassador for a lot of people right now.
You really are.
So I was like, okay, Dara, you've been studying psychology and spirituality, you know, your entire life. Like, come up with some directions right now. And so for myself, and so I did it. I sat there and I said, okay, I've been having this was the question that kind of launched me onto the path. I said, okay, I have been looping in this narrative, a desire for justice, a desire for the wrong to be righted
the justice
for 3
narrative.
years now. Yeah, what is the opposite of that? And I like said that to myself. What is the opposite of this thing I've been doing for 3 years? And so I actually want to point that question to you, like, because I like to ask hosts like what they think the opposite of that is. It's just curious to me.
I would say that I would need to run a narrative in my mind of all the reasons those people are good people and why they touched my life in different ways. And also give myself the opportunity to read their prescription lenses as best I can from a distance and find out or allow myself to give them grace in what it is to be human and in the moment at any given time. I mean, that's probably the best way that I can describe it, but I run a new narrative on them. I would have to beat it into the ground.
That's beautiful. Yeah. You would want, right, so you'd want to create a new narrative that would
really like
you to.
Sorry, that's how it starts. I'm sure that's like the first few times it's going to sound like that. But eventually you're going to get to find out what they meant to you, whether it's good or bad. I feel like you get to see what you learned. And then you get to recognize the strength of the tools that you picked up in that scenario.
Right.
And then go in your toolbox, and going forward, you don't have to look for a wrench ever again, because a wrench is at that intersection back there where you came to deceit and loss of business in one intersection.
Right. So I love it. And I love that your narrative is all about arriving to a place of ultimately, after repeating the high-minded narrative enough, that you would arrive
like meditation, if you will.
Right. You would arrive to a place of compassion. And compassion for yourself and the lessons learned.
That's the hard one for me. Because people do not realize that when you harbor resentment of others, you do not forgive yourself for having that resentment. It's an invisible narrative running in the background, because to be human is to forgive, right? Because otherwise we're staying in a state that is not love. And we are in our natural state when we're feeling love for others. To retain that and hold it in is going to cause maladies, issues that we don't know. I think we're getting ready to go into how you probably got an illness and you started to find yourself in that situation. So I'm really curious to see how this unfolds.
So I just want you to know I agree with everything you just said. So my answer to that question that night was, I can bless this whole mess, every aspect of this entire mess, with the highest love.
Oh, you went with a home goods sign. Bless this mess. Let's keep it simple. I like it. Tell me I'm not wrong.
Exactly. So
these things are in everybody's home.
Next time you're in Home Goods or Target and you see bless this mess, you will see the depth of that message.
Thinking about my childhood.
Right.
Not a dirty kitchen, I promise. I'm thinking about something way deeper.
Right, exactly. So I did that and some other things and followed it diligently. And 3 weeks later, I felt a peace that I hadn't felt in 3 years. And I was a geek for healing modalities. And so when I arrived to this moment, I was like, damn, forgiveness is for real. Because I was definitely more of a skeptic, for most of my life, even though I'd heard about it throughout my life. And then my second thought was, oh, wow. And that wasn't pardoning. Why does everybody think and say that forgiveness is pardoning? But that was that. And I just went on with my life. But I personally became a devotee and just kept, that really horrible thing happened 5 years ago that I still have feelings about. Will this thing that I figured out work on that? And it did. And so in my own personal life, I just started forgiving everything.
Started using that wrench for anything that it would fit.
Right. And then over the next 2 years, as I was doing this, I was having conversations with people, and I started to see that most people were where I had been. They had something they wanted to forgive, and they lacked a practical path.
Keep going. I'm recording somewhere else as well, so I just hit this here. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So that kind of sent me into an even deeper dive and made me realize, oh, wow, there's actually a need for this thing that I put together. And so here I am talking to you.
I think that's beautiful that you were able to recognize it and use it as a way to help others find their forgiveness or the peace that comes with forgiveness, right? Because I think that's really one of the most important things.
How were you, what did you learn about forgiveness growing up?
So I grew up Southern Baptist in a country area. So forgiveness to me was the pardoning of a wrongdoing by someone to me, a grace given for someone's faux pas or whatever it is to my personal well-being. It's a horrible way to look at it, right? Because nobody needs to be forgiven. We just need to accept that something happened and that the outcome is what it is and learn from it and move forward, right? We didn't do that. As a kid, it was always like, you know, the old school Bible ways was the way that forgiveness was applied.
And did you feel like people were able to do it?
No, absolutely not. Forgiveness in my childhood was a tick mark in a battle back and forth of who's in the current state of shame, right? It was a way to control others. It was a way to manipulate that I think a lot of people don't realize that they do. Sometimes we don't forgive because it's a very convenient way to hold a position in life or reign over others in some way, shape, or form as a way to defend our own insecurity at the end of the day. So not only are you taking it out on yourself, you're taking it out on others, and the child inside is the one that's suffering in the end, right? Just kind of how I look at it.
Right. So it's interesting, this this spiritual phenomena that's, you know, kind of crosses all religions and faiths and has this very specific definition to pardon others, actually like doesn't work for a lot of people. And real quick, I need to say a disclaimer. There's a lot of stories of people who have forgiven wars and atrocities and really intense things. And these people define forgiveness as pardoning, and they 100% swear it changed their life and put them on the path of healing. And I believe these people. I do. And because I think that the pardoning definition, it's so strong and widespread. It has to be working massive. For someone. It has to be working for someone, right?
Massive.
And so I believe that the pardoning definition does work for some people. And I believe especially those of us who identify as spiritual but not religious, and that my hand is raised, that's my identification. It just doesn't land with us. Like, we just don't have the wiring for it. And people who identify as spiritual but not religious, it's a very specific demographic. Like, we don't want to believe anything because someone told us to believe it.
Well, hold on a minute. Can you repeat that sentence, please? Please, just repeat it.
We don't want to believe anything because someone told us to believe it.
Amen. Oh my God, my entire life. Do not come and tell me about a philosophy or how I should interpret it or what it is to guide me or anything of that nature. Just tell me where you found it. I'll go look at it. I'll read it and I'll interpret it for myself, because your lenses might be red, green, kind of like those old like code glasses where if you put them on and you look down at a piece of paper, if you're wearing the red ones, you get to read everything in the red, but everything else disappears, right? And then the other one does it and it's in blue, right? Both of you looking at the same paper, but seeing completely different shit, right? Because your prescriptions are different. So let me come to my conclusions without your filter. It's hard enough using my own glasses and keeping them clean. I don't need to wear two pair. That's a great fucking analogy.
So I take it you identify as, would you identify as spiritual but not religious? Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
I see truth in all of them. Right.
Another thing about the spiritual but not religious category is that we're very logical. We're very practical group. Which is
very weird considering it is such an existential thought process that's required to get outside of that box. Right.
Yeah. So that's an interesting point for sure.
The juxtaposition is pretty wild. Right?
Yeah. But we want spirituality to walk its talk. We don't want it to be like a platitude. We don't want it to be a concept. We don't want it to be a cool idea, you know? And up until 2012, I was like, every time I wanted to understand forgiveness, I'm a seeker. I was like, hey, if this thing makes sense, bring it to me. But whenever I got close to it, I was like, you know, I think this is just like a cool spiritual ideal, but it really doesn't have any legs. And at least I could never make it walk. So, you know, here I was in this dark night of the soul where I was being forced to figure it out, or I chose, I wasn't being forced, but the universe was definitely like saying, like, this is what you need to figure out. It was
your time.
Yeah.
Your time to walk through it so you could come back and talk to people about it.
However, I kind of want to touch base on the health thing, because a lot of people who hear the story go, oh, wow, and then she forgave, and then her health issues cleared up. And my health issues actually did not clear up. So
there's the twist.
However, I have resolved like mystery chronic pains with the practice. And then there is a lot of, you know, forgiveness is moving forward in terms of becoming, you know, more accessible and more logical in general. So there are people who are doing research on the forgiveness as I present it and understand it and teach it. And it does benefit the physical body, you know, as you said, like
mental health.
You're not carrying a huge emotional burden. Your body is going to benefit from not carrying that burden. It's pretty straightforward. But I don't want people to think that like what I do cures cancers or, you know, creates miracles. Like our soul's curriculum in this life is our soul's curriculum in this life. And in the human world, this is a conditional world where we are all always up against limitations and conditions.
You're right.
For me, it's been a health issue. So
my curriculum is to burn all curriculum. That is my mission. I think because I feel like we're playing almost like an extended game of make-believe or a genetic and hereditary insanity that is in a loop effect that we got to see via the pandemic, kind of like sticking a stick in the spokes of a tire, right? Everybody flies off. They get to turn around and see what? They were on a wheel, right? So what happens? Now you have to make a conscious decision. Do I jump on it again? Or do I go the other way? Or do I use the wheel, which is fantastic too. And just knowing there's a wheel in general is a leg up. But stepping back on it is a problem that I have. And I think that you have to break things in order to bring them back together as, say, stained glass, right? We can take all of the damage that we've done and build it back to something beautiful. But we can't repeat the same things that we're doing. We can't keep opening the book and repeating and repeating and repeating and expecting people to understand. They're not going to do it. Why? Because what? Same thing you just said earlier. We don't want somebody else to give us our conclusions. We don't want anybody else to tell us what to believe. That is why it is our job to be a lighthouse. The only thing we have to do is get up every day and be ourselves 100%. Be the puzzle piece you are. Be a corner, be a side, be a middle, whatever you are. And then the rest of it falls together around you. Your friends will be with you, right? The people that you care about will come to you because their pieces fit your pieces and the other ones will fit where they belong. But in the meantime, we all look like that busted ass puzzle you find at like a cabin that's been rented for like 15 years and there's like shit scribbled on them and the corners are bent. There's nobody cares enough about themselves to be themselves. They just want to run the narrative.
It's a really exciting time in terms of people really separating themselves or divorcing themselves from what society tells us to be versus who we truly are.
I love Gen Z.
Right. Yeah. It's awesome. And it's super exciting to, are you Gen X?
I'm Gen X.
Okay.
I believe that we are here to give Gen X glasses to Gen Z with their empathy and allow them to be able to properly help society without mowing them down like, Cyclops and X-Men. I think that we're the glasses that they need in order to put such beautiful intentions to good use. Right now, they just want to mow it all down.
Yeah, but just like how you're probably going to raise your son, is that we have gone through such a process of differentiation to divorce ourselves from these wax narratives that we grew up in. Whereas like your son is going to always be, you're going to always direct him back to his personal truth. And I have to say that like my mother grew up in a Catholic family, and she was the youngest of 10, and she questioned Catholicism and was reprimanded for it. And so I grew up in a house
that really makes you believe harder.
Right. So when she had my sister and I, she very much protected us and said, these kids are they're going to be seekers. I'm raising them to be seekers and to find out the truth for themselves. I still had it coming at me from every other place it possibly could come at me, but she really did like hold on to that, and I'm so grateful today that like I wasn't like, I don't know what your process of differentiation was from growing up in the Baptist church. I imagine it was huge.
So I was in the Baptist church as a kid, and then my stepmother, I was in the Catholic church. And then after that, I did the tour of all the things that you could see in the deep South, from anointing the sick where they fall on the ground after the preacher touches them and they hit the folding chairs and whatnot, snakes, the whole thing. Like I did the whole tour because that's how the South is. It's the Bible Belt, right? I didn't have a problem with it. I didn't believe that the people saying what they were saying believe themselves, if that makes sense. Right. So much like you had this, entanglement with forgiveness, I had an entanglement with the word faith. Faith was something that was extremely difficult for me to wrap my head around, right? I didn't understand it when people said they say, have faith. I have faith in this. I have faith in God. I have faith in all these different things. And I'm like, but what is faith? I'm like, I don't understand that word because there's no thing that I can put on it, right? Because you're telling me there's a God. So that's just not going to happen. Right? God's got to show up and tell me God, or reveal in some way, or allow me to open my eyes enough to see what I should have seen. Right? But for faith, I just couldn't put my finger on it. And I began meditating about 6 years ago. Right? Because I was at a crossroads in my life where I was on my knees and I had to plant a tree all over again because I hated what I was doing. I was a solution architect for some of the largest consulting firms in the world. I was making great money on paper, looked amazing, hated life. Right? Absolutely hated life. I'd buy get a theater, get an Audi, get whatever, and still feel like shit 2 days later. Well, guess what? You got to take care of the child that grew up, with food insecurities and around drugs and abuse and things like that. You've got to take care of that. So there was a amount of time where I didn't even know who I was for all those years. But what I did hit my knees. And that's when I started to have that love affair with meditation and started trying different methods. And when I began working with my breath and I got further into meditation, because let's face it, if I told you to watch your breath right now, you'd breathe for yourself. You'd take it over and start breathing. 99% of people do that. We even tell people to catch their breath. What the hell else were they going to do? Like, it's not like it's not there when you're not doing it. It's always going. So for me, it was the moment that I was able to cease trying to breathe myself and allow breath to return without my assistance. When it came back to me and gave me life back without me trying to pull it back and witnessing it release and come back and release and come back. For me, that was the moment that I realized, That is where my faith lies, is in the return of breath in a heartbeat. Because those things, nobody else has any other influence over but me. And if it returns every time, I can have faith in it. So that's how I was able to connect the dots for my word, or for that feeling that I couldn't get a hold of.
Why? I noticed your logo is of the right and left hemisphere of the brain.
It's a yin yang. And it's actually the theater masks.
No, not. It's the one that's actually of the skull, not the.
Oh, behind me over here.
No.
Which one? This one?
It's on your website.
No, it's So on the you're talking about the hemisphere. Okay, I got you. Okay. I was thinking of the logo itself, the yin yang, non-purist skull, and the Tragedy Academy. But I know what you're talking about. Yes, the two hemispheres of the brain. I do believe that you have to be able to lay with your lion. I think all people have the same thoughts. They just choose when to pull them into their mind. Right? And their lenses will give them the opportunity to reach out and pull them in and make them their reality. But I believe we're all in the same boat. And I think that left and right hemisphere of the brain is indicative of the two of a greater whole. Same thing with the yin yang.
So what is your do you understand like the left versus the right? I mean, I imagine you do, right?
Wait, a left brain is creative, right side is logical, isn't it?
Well, it's the opposite.
Or opposite, sorry.
Yeah.
Something like
that. So, because that, I teach people that we're anatomically designed to forgive.
Explain that.
So, the skills that we need in order to forgive are our creativity, imagination, intuition, and our spiritual connection. And these are all qualities of the right hemisphere of the brain. No, our culture does not cultivate the right hemisphere of the brain.
Not
at all. We're all.
There's a reason for that, but that's another show.
Right. So we're just being hammered with developing the left hemisphere of the brain, which great. So we are going to survive, and we're going to, however, when we hit crises moments, the left hemisphere of the brain, logic, actually is no good in those moments. We actually need the skills of the right hemisphere of the brain. And one of the reasons I think I was able to kind of figure this forgiveness thing out in that fateful night in October 2012 is I'm just naturally very right brained. As much as I've been honed to develop the left hemisphere of my brain, and yes, I'm amazing at simple math and blah, blah, blah. I have always been a very right-brained person. And so I have strong access to my imagination, to my intuition, to my spiritual connection, to my creativity. And I say that specifically those four that I'm mentioning right now, are the team players. And when you kind of arrange those in a certain way, we have a very natural ability to restore, regenerate, and heal. And to me, that's the true definition of forgiveness. It's a spiritual process that heals, and we're pardoning, ceasing anger, having compassion, letting go of the past are all potential outcomes of the spiritual process that heals. But you need to do the spiritual process that heals, and then those things flow forth. You don't have any animosity towards whoever anymore because you're restored. It's actually the wound or the mark that's left that creates those ruminations. But once you take care of the mark, the ruminations go away, and you're like, oh, this was just a really heavy lesson, and heavy experience in my journey.
So what does finding that mark look like to you?
Oh, well, it's kind of, it's right there in our bodies, just waiting.
Let me rephrase the question.
Okay.
I would assume that mindfulness is part of the core of recognition of these types of scenarios, like the mark that we're discussing. So I would say, my question would be, what methods did you use for introspection and self-work in order to find those marks and identify them and work on them?
So I believe that our bodies are minds. Mm-hmm. The mind isn't just up here. The mind is this.
The mind is everything.
The mind is, and our bodies have incredible information, and they have some things that they want to say. And so one of the things I teach people is how to just let your body say whatever it wants to say. And you're going to discover the magic of what I'm saying to you right now in about a year and a half, 2 years. Because your son is going to get extremely upset about something that makes absolutely zero sense. And you're going to try to explain to him that doesn't make any sense. And he is going to get more and more upset that you are not listening to him. And when you finally stop and say, tell me what you need to say, and he just gets to say whatever he wants to say. And when he's done, you say, and what else? And he just gets to keep going. You're going to find that you just found the magic of calming down a toddler. And he's going to look at you in a very soft way with like, thanks, Dad. And he's going to run off and be okay. And so in terms of, you've mentioned inner child, I do believe in the inner child stuff, but I just think like, we just have a lot of energies running through us. Some of them are our inner child. Some of them are just kind of these strong personality traits that we're born with. Some of us are just prone to anxiety. Some of us are just prone to rage. Some of us are just prone to shame. We all have this thing we need to deal with.
I'd love to take a little bit of a deeper dive in there into the prone tos. Right.
Uh-huh.
So for me, when I look at the prone twos, I start to see what is behind the prone two? What is being protected by the prone two? What is being protected by the personality trait? What is being given shelter by this addiction? What is those things have a mark, so to speak. When I say a child wound, that could mean last week, that could be 5 years old, right? It's a wound before now. And I like to think that's why the other part of the logo itself are the masks, the sock and buskin mask, tragedy and, comedy. But a little bit deeper in that is that I believe we all carry a certain amount of them, and we compile them over time, and metaphorically they become something heavy in a bag that we carry over our shoulder. Because when we use different voices, different intonations, different personalities, because we do talk to your mom and then talk to AT&T, check yourself. You sound completely different. That's two personalities, right? And you have to remember them all. And you keep fracturing and fracturing. And I like to think that those prone twos and those personality traits and those things have something there that you can benefit from finding and releasing, or recognizing that the mask is being used. At least that's how it worked for me. My recognition of it was that I was carrying all these characters and not trusting the innate one that I had inside of me.
And now you do like a lot of maintenance, right?
I'm the maintenance man. I'm going to go way back. I'm like Schneider. Right? I am that much of a maintenance man. Do you remember way back?
Yes, I do. Absolutely. Yes,
I went to my mother's VCR.
I went to bed at night listening to the theme song of MASH.
And that's how I know it, because my mom.
I was Interplanet Janet for Halloween. Yes.
So I'm the Schneider of meditation. I walk around with a tool belt, the whole nine. It's full of things that I need to tell myself. Right?
Okay, so can I point something out right now? Can we go deep? So you just made this beautiful case for self-examination and self-exploration, which, I'm a huge fan of. I spend a good part of every day doing that for myself. And you still have those energies when all is said and done, right? Like there's certain things we can release, and there's certain things that I would say, for example, you seem like the type to me that was born a very philosophical person. And I really feel that like you came out of the womb that way. Like you came out of the womb like a very questioning, like
yes, I questioned everything.
Right. You know, so there was nothing like that happened in your childhood. It's just your unique personality that no,
there's
it's
a
just
fracture
your unique
there.
personality. You know, it's beautiful to be a questioning person.
Oh, absolutely.
You know? And I think that that's kind of what made you interface with your childhood in the way that you did. But it was just like this natural personality characteristic that you were a questioning person.
I'm going to take you one level up on that. So as a child, we see intuitive people, empathetic people later in life. We try to put a label on it. How did that happen? Some people say it's spiritual. Some say it's psychological, right? And from the psychological perspective, it took me a while to come to terms with that and the spiritual side of it. And it was that as a child, if you're raised in a traumatic environment, right, where you're constantly hyper vigilant, right, and the caregivers or adults in your life act fractitiously in the way that they handle you and introduce you to society, right? Are we following? That for me becomes a extremely hypervigilant and examinative person. I believe no one. I never believe them until I know myself. I was always in a position of defending myself and questioning what somebody else's motives were. You are correct, though. I question the shit out of everything. I did that before that. I just think it got magnified by, a belt.
Right. Yeah, like you were somebody who really could have used consistency and what's it called? People who are of their word and for things that were being said to actually like make sense in the real environment. So because having a world of integrity, right? Let's say that was so important to you that when you saw that it didn't have integrity, that completely lit up, like that fired up all your warning signals and made you like, oh, this is not a safe place. And then that whole wiring got played over and over again because you were a kid and you were stuck in that situation. 1000%, I'm with you. But let's talk in a year, you're going to see like you're this little boy you have is not a blank slate.
No, that's why I said
he's got a personality.
Genetic and hereditary insanity.
Right. He's got a personality.
There's both. It is 100%. I firmly believe that we're all walking around in a cloud or a fog and that all other creatures on the planet are in heaven. They're watching us and our mental illness stroll around a beautiful rock without realizing that every book has already said we'll get there eventually, but they didn't say there was a destination, right? We're already there. We're here now. We just have to give into reality, life, and our surroundings, and the now. Stop living in the mental illness that is the future, the past, because neither one of them actually exist. I mean, that the root of forgiveness should also have a branch that says, once it's done, right? Yeah. It cannot happen again. Like there is a certain amount. Well, it can't happen again in another, instance. But for my understanding, I like to say like PTSD, right? Let's use that as an example. Yeah. I had a very off-color joke told to me one time in the barbershop. This elderly gentleman says, he's like, if you locked your dog and your wife in the trunk of your car for an hour and you came back later, which one would be happy to see you? And I was like, okay, whatever, dude. Yeah, the dog, but that's, horrible, right? But there's something in that, right? And when I say there's something in that, it's that the human, whoever was in there, would probably go on and have a certain amount of defined life from the time that they were trapped in the trunk of a car They write a book about it. They have PTSD from it. They never want to walk by a Lincoln Continental. I don't know. Whatever the outcome is. Dog doesn't give two shits. It's done. It's over with. Chop a dog's leg off. Done. It's over with. Dog's going to run off on 3. So there's a certain amount of that genetic and hereditary insanity.
All right, I'm going to loop this back in.
Oh, I love it. Let's do this. I'm going to
take you deeper right now. So what that dog is actually going to do when it hits a moment of trauma, it's going to allow its body to move however it wants to move until the trauma is substantially moved from its body. So like when an animal narrowly gets hit by a car, it'll go off into the woods and shake for however long. So this is kind of when you talk about like, where's the mark? Where's the mark? The mark is in our bodies. And it's like, do we have the courage and to just say, okay, I see you in there. What do you want to say? How do you want to move? What do you want to do? Like, what is it that you need in order to move this energy through? So this is, again, I teach people a lot of things in this course, but that's one of the main things that I kind of love to get out there, because I feel like moving energy, we somehow, in becoming civilized Westerners, have had this stoic view of energy moving through our bodies. And if we look at animals and children, again, I bring children back to your son. You're going to see this with your son, and it's going to be gorgeous. Like, he's going to just move his body and do what he needs to do with his body unabashedly. And it's just going to be this like gorgeous, primal, healthy response, Yeah, authenticity. That's going to be very healthy to circulating energy within his body. But all of a sudden we become these civilized, trained adults, who are just way too up here, and we disregard like all the major energy that's wanting to be tended to and moved down here. Yeah. So, and when I say, with feeling your feelings, I think that is like awesome. But I feel like for a lot of people, feeling feelings is an incredibly scary thing. Like I liken it to saying like, jump into the deep end, but hope you can swim, while you're in there.
I agree with you. It scares people all the time to have to go through something that they left in the rearview mirror, thinking it would never show up again. Right? I like that analogy where I use a rope as you go through life and you come to a trial or tribulation. You have a choice. You can either A, live it, feel it, hurt, cry, hit the ground, fight, go through it, or you can tie a knot in your rope and move on. But what happens to a length of rope that you continue tying knots in that you do not address? Dad joke, level up. But in all seriousness, you become a mess. A wadded piece of rope that is not able to do anything for yourself or anyone else, right? So for me, meditation was the opportunity for me to sit down with that ball of rope and identify the knots and loosen them. Starts out hard.
I listened to one of your podcasts last night, and you were talking about your meditation practice, and you said, and I loved this. You said that the meditation practice helps you get ahead of yourself, like, and helps you like see the things that you need to tend to and be intentional about and proactive about, just by giving yourself that space in the morning. It's like, and you wouldn't, prior to meeting me, or maybe never again, once this conversation's over, I don't know if you would ever have described it in this way, but in my opinion, it was like you were giving this spaciousness to your emotional body, and being like, okay, I see you. Like, what do you need? Like, how can I tend to you and nurture you and nourish you so that we have a good day, and at the end of the day my wife loves me and everything's cool.
No, you're exactly right. And I think that we are so often ignorant to the fact that we have an observer. We are observing ourselves because something has to be taking it in.
I have a question
Please.
for you. Have you ever, being that you're, such a strong meditation practitioner, so have you ever been like overwhelmed, and no judgment? This is kind of like a
I'm overwhelmed just waking up, so it's cool. No offense taken.
So this is kind of like a hit or miss question with meditation practitioners, but I always like to ask, has a profound feeling of unconditional love ever completely taken you over?
Once.
One
time, post meditation, walking my dog. I've read, so I was not of a spiritual nature, just more of a skeptic growing up for the longest time, again, until I started meditating. And for me, I've never even talked about this on the show before, but I was with my dog, I was walking, and at one moment I knew one thing, and the next moment I knew something completely different. And in that completely different, it gave an overwhelming amount of love and forgiveness for everyone around me and myself all at once. And it's kind of something that I discuss all the time during the show because I say it constantly. It's a genetic and hereditary insanity, right? In my mind, at first, the way that I felt after that was slightly confused as to how to put words on it.
Right.
I knew it. It was like somebody had snapped a finger and removed something that was actually paper from in front of me that I could have gone through the whole time. Like, how did I not notice this kind of scenario? And it allowed me to see that it's not their fault. It's not anybody's fault. We're only perpetuating what was given to us by the last generation over and over and over. And the longer we play the masquerade, the further we go down the rabbit hole and we forget who we are. Right? I think that maybe consciousness gave us a fear of death or what's next. So we began creating because that's what we're good at. We created legacies, we created buildings, we created.
So that experience that you had of like pure love, right? And often meditation practitioners report having experiences like that. Yoga practitioners as well. And it's interesting because for a lot of us, I
didn't know it at the time.
For a lot of us, it happens like once we get off the mat. You know what I mean? Like you go walk the dog, and then Sean Korn, reported this exact same experience, and she's a huge yoga practitioner. Anyway, so my point is that is, and real quick, this is also what near-death experience, people who've had near-death experiences, they report that exact thing. So according to like all the mystics, that experience is what we truly are. That's actually, we're in the matrix, and that's actually like once we get out of the matrix.
You're speaking my language across the board.
But here's the thing that I wanted to point out. That is medicine.
Yes,
that is a medicine. That is a medicine that all human beings
I could have run 100 miles that day. I seriously could have.
You can use it tonight. You can use it tomorrow. It's something that all human beings have access to. And this is the other thing that's unique about how I teach, is that I'm teaching people like, how do you access and apply this immense love that is the truth of our existence, even though it's blocked from us, 99.99% of the time. How do you use that and apply it to the mark that's was left?
And I mean, honestly, you forgive yourself for holding on to it.
Well, yeah. I mean, so again, I don't define forgiveness as pardoning, right?
Yeah.
I define it as the ability to access that love that you experienced so vividly. That love is always right there, but that night it overtook you. It's intense when it comes on. I only had it here I am. I teach people how to do this, right? But in terms of the experience that you had, I've only had that experience once in my life also. It's a very rare and overwhelming experience to have that actually like it's almost a little
like
scary.
an electric shock. Remember, yeah, it jolted the living bejesus out of me. I had to stop for a second.
Right.
And honestly, I couldn't have found out any other way about my reality because again, nobody tells me shit about what I believe. So all of those steps, and I had to, whenever something would happen on my journey, nobody was leading me down the road. Nobody was telling me what to expect. Nobody was telling, because I don't want to know what to expect because then I'm probably going to do it. A suggestion.
What do they call you? People like you are self-arising truth seekers.
Ooh, I like that. Sounds fancy.
Self-arising truth seekers.
Sounds fancy for just get out of my way. Do it myself. But you're not wrong. Like, so for me.
Well, I'm so glad I didn't have to convince you about, because I don't like to convince anybody. I have zero interest in convincing anyone about anything.
Don't get it when they get it.
I'm so glad that when I said, like, have you had a profound experience of unconditional love? Had you not had it, then it would just be like my experience versus your experience. But I'm just so psyched that you were like,
I honestly don't talk about it.
I did.
Yeah, I don't talk about it, but I mean, there's something to be said about taking the time to love yourself enough to spend 10 minutes or 20 minutes with your own mind and heart. Like I was disrespecting the out of my existence.
What can you tell me? Like, what's your feeling towards like having a child? Like in terms of unconditional love. I mean, I imagine that's huge, also, right?
Right.
Are you blown away right now at like this 100%. At this little thing that you look down at and you're like, oh my God.
This is going to sound mildly narcissistic, but it was almost like seeing myself get a whole new slate.
Aww.
Right? Like I could see that I wasn't going anywhere. No matter what happened to me, I was going to be here with him because he is me. We're the same person, just separated in time. Right? That's why we have reincarnation or past lives or whatever. But you're connected to everybody. I just assume that we all have a long DNA strand and you can pick up on your past people at any point in time. There's a lot of bees. But tell me I'm wrong. I'm like, how am I not? We're connected by a long ass chain of DNA. There's traits and everything.
Right?
Their traumas become locked in themselves. When they create another child, that's still in there.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure I had some real heinous people in my background, some dodos and some greats. And I experience them on a daily basis in my personality traits, I'm sure. Right?
Wow.
That's the way I like to look at it, is that I believe that we are an amalgamation of the people that came before us in our genetic line. That's your past life. Was I a ninja at some point in time? Maybe. Who knows? 23andMe says I'm white as shit. Like I just fell from the sky and landed in Europe and there's no track anywhere else. I was really sad. I was like, man, I don't have any seasoning. I'm like a boiled chicken breast, like a wonder bread of life. That's kind of mad. But I think that we are an amalgamation of where we come from as far as the genetic composition of our parents, our grandparents.
You feel like a profound connection to that ancestral line, you know, now that your son is here. Like, you're like, oh my God.
I feel like you know how when you drop a anchor in the water and there's slack in the line? I feel like the anchor was already there the whole time, but the moment that my son was born, that line went and I knew my place. I was there and he was always going to be on the other side of it and I wasn't going to move ever again. But he was going to be the one to continue. Does it make sense? That tautness told me I was done. But I wasn't because he was continuing on the same line.
Wow.
No matter how far he went. And then when he had someone, he would stop. and then the next one will go. But you can always, just like those cups with strings, you can turn around and talk to your past. You always can, because there's no such thing as time.
Right.
It's all accessible at any given moment. It's just the lens that you're wearing when you're reading the book. And we leave more glasses than lens crafters on the fucking couch than we use. If we took the time to use all of the viewpoints that we could possibly have, we would recognize again that we're in heaven, right? We would recognize that everything we're doing is just a masquerade to protect ourselves from the ultimate reality that we're all going to die. Like, I feel like everybody fears that.
And there is no death.
Correct, because you're already dead. Time doesn't exist. You already were born and dead. You're just viewing it from the outside in. That's, again, you have an observer. Once you take that moment to become mindful enough to access that observation point, you will get to see that you're acting. Everybody is an actor on a grand stage, just trying to be loved and accepted from moment to moment, stacking up shame, stacking up guilt, trying to exchange things and have these moments, but there's nothing to be done with it. It's all a personal choice. The mind does control everything, like you said, double slit experiment. It all starts here, right? It's not from the outside in, it's from the inside out.
I love it.
So I genuinely appreciate you coming on. And I like that you let me push a little, but I knew that you were going to have fun, right?
Yeah.
I love the conversation.
I love the conversation. Totally. I mean, it's, have you read Harry Potter?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the world is full of a lot of muggles, right? So it's always nice to meet a non-muggle and talk.
Right? Absolutely.
Because, I mean, you get to do it all the time because of your podcast, right?
Absolutely. I talk to so many different backgrounds. That's the beauty of this show, is trying to transcribe those prescriptions for other people to read, to show people that slice of life and where they're at and what comprised who they are, so they can understand it and not judge it, right? And bridge divides.
Yeah.
And people like you operating in the world of forgiveness is, integral for all of us to come together. Because if we don't understand that, if we don't comprehend it, or if we don't realize that there's a million definitions of it, and that it really actually comes down to love, right? I think that we come into that problem with language all the time, because we don't understand that other cultures have words for things and feelings that maybe we didn't identify, but we try to fish hook them into a particular word that fits ours, but it definitely isn't as deep, right? So learning forgiveness on a spiritual level eliminates that vocabulary problem, right? It allows people to connect on a deeper level and eliminate the fact that they've been told or learned their communication, but a baser instinct is
and I just think
love.
Especially for people who feel like it's a cop-out, so one of the messages I just, want to help get to people is that, look, as I said, there's a lot of people that this pardoning definition works for, but if it doesn't work for you, that doesn't take you out of the forgiveness game. And I would like to
We're going to take away your forgive.
A lot of people have something to forgive, and they won't do it because they think it's pardoning.
They're not ready.
Well, they just think that pardoning would be a cop-out, or that they would mean they were a loser. There's a lot of reasons why people just are like this, or what happens is truly unexcusable. Again, these are very logical people, and if it's unexcusable, it's unexcusable. So so just one of the things I want to, it's my tagline is the structure of forgiveness, but the next thing after the structure of forgiveness is, what if forgiveness isn't pardoning? And so that's the question I would love to leave with everybody is, what if it's not? What if it's something bigger?
I absolutely love that. I love that.
Okay, cool.
So why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Oh, yes, howtoforgive.com, which how to forgive is what I typed in on that fateful night of October 2012 when I was looking for my step-by-step. And so that's the name of my course. And it's a 6-week course, and it runs 3 times a year. And it's really just all, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, about developing the right hemisphere, the capabilities of the right hemisphere of the brain in a very strong way. I want people to graduate the course and be like, wow, like I understand this part of my brain. I know I can confidently use it and ignite it when I need to. And yeah, it's and I invite people to enter into the course with something they want to forgive. So at the end of the course, they can see how powerful it is.
I can't imagine nobody or anybody shows up without something.
Yeah, my demographic's huge. Right?
You have an infinite pool of candidates. So again,
thank you so
I
much,
genuinely
Dave. Thank
appreciate
you
you.
for having this podcast. I love the name and I love the conversation you're spinning. And
appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. And remember, everybody, be cool and keep learning.